Okay, we're gonna kick things off. First, I would like for everyone to give a round of applause for coming out tonight. So everyone, please clap it up. So I'm just going to let you know about what 100state is. So my name is Gregory St. Fort. I'm the executive director here at 100state. If this is your first time here, I'm just going to break it down. 100state is a co-working community, the largest co-working community in the state of Wisconsin. So we have over 220 members, and they consist of so many different people of different backgrounds, different skill sets. So people from professional services to coders to we have a magician that's a member. So a lot of people just coming together, collaborating to leverage their skills to change the community and, you know, following their passion. So we have a really awesome group. There's a lot of different 100state members that are here as well. So if you're a 100state member, raise your hand, because I know there's some of them spotted in the crowd. So we have some really awesome people. Well, first I want to give another shout out to Phil 59 for streaming this event. So clap it up for them. So they've been really awesome, and they're streaming this event live on our website, as well as the Cap Times website. So we're really happy to have a partnership and members like them that are part of our community. So I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm gonna pass it over to Chris. I want to make one quick announcement. So the Yelp Foundation picked us for a potential grant. So there's a little competition amongst a few nonprofits in town. So if you go to what's the address? ypgivesocial.org, and if you could vote for 100state, and we have a chance to win $5,000 grant, so that'd be pretty awesome if you had your support for that. Thank you very much, and I'm gonna pass it over to Chris.
Greg, thanks very much. I'm Chris Murphy. I'm the managing editor of the Cap Times, and again, I want to thank everyone here for coming out tonight. This is a really great crowd. We're really excited. This is the sixth Cap Times talk that we've done, and the first one at 100state. We became sponsors back in August, and I can't say enough about how much it's meant to be part of this community and how much it's helped our coverage and help see what's going on in Madison. It's really been great. A couple things I want to point out before I turn it over to Laurel, who is our reporter who works here once a week, who will introduce the panel. If you haven't signed up already and you want to hear more about upcoming events that we're doing, please give us your name and email address here, and you are welcome to pick up a t-shirt or a hoodie while there. I think some of you also discovered that there's beer here too, and we'll be here once we're done. And let's see. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laurel, who is going to introduce our panel. Thanks very much for coming out tonight. Should mention, yes, I did forget some key things. For participation tonight, if you tweet to 100CT Startups, I will be monitoring that on Cap Times, and I can get some questions that would. And we'll probably have some time at the end for a couple of people to come up and ask questions of the panel, but probably not too many. So if you've got questions you want to get out, please do send them in real time, and I'll do my best to get them up to Laurel here while we're going on. Thanks again.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you guys so much for coming out. This is an amazing crowd. We're really excited. I also want to mention this is really great. I feel like kind of Mr. Rogers in this chair. So this is not what I was expecting, and I'll try to be comfortable and figure out how to hold my notes. So to get started, I'm just going to introduce state. Then we have Amy Gannon, who's the interim dean at the School of. We have Kevin Little, who is the vice president at the Greater Madison Chamber of Commerce. Mo Cheeks, an alder for the City of Madison, and Mo, until very recently, was the director of the Wisconsin Innovation Network. And now he is the vice president of business development for Miosoft here in Madison. So this is his first public appearance as in that new role. So let's clap it up for Mo, yeah. Then we have Willie Hakizimana, who's the founder of Export Abroad. Ruth Rohlich, who is, I want to make sure I get business development specialist for the City of Madison. Make sure I got that right. Troy Vosseller, founder of Generator, co-founder of Generator. And Eric Martell, who's co-founder of EatStreet. So awesome panel, really excited. To kick things off, I wanted to actually start with Eric, so we have a good segue. You guys probably heard that EatStreet announced a $15 million fundraising deal last week. Yeah, please, $15 million, this is awesome. And I think that brings the total to 30 million, right? Yeah. So I wanted Eric to tell us a little bit about why you launched the startup here in Madison and why you decided to stay. I think the first part of the question is a little obvious, but yeah,
Sure.
Go ahead.
So we started EatStreet when I was a sophomore in college going into my junior year, and fundamentally what our company does is builds software to allow restaurants to accept orders online. So we don't do any food delivery ourselves, but you go on EatStreet, you place an order, we get that order over to the restaurant makes your food and delivers it. The idea for EatStreet kind of came out of the most organic means possible. We were really hungry, and the restaurant that we wanted to order from didn't have a website. So it doesn't get a lot simpler than that. We were, myself and my two co-founders, two of us were working a software engineering internship. Matt, our CEO now, was selling cars for Rostero, setting sales records. He said, hey, if you can build a website for me, I can sell this to the restaurants, and that was kind of how we got going. We were a Madison company because we were students here, and we were working part-time jobs and full-time students, as well as getting the company going. That was about 5.5 years ago. Really, what we realized is that Madison has a ton of excellent resources, from the Law and Entrepreneurship Clinic, who provided us free legal consultation in the very early days, to the presence of Generator, to communities like 100state. I think that there were points where we thought, hey, we might want to move the company to areas where maybe capital's more accessible, but obviously we've been able to raise here. We feel like this is our home, and honestly, we've fallen in love with the community here at Madison, and we just never wanted to leave.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So I wanted Willie to kind of piggyback on that question. Have you ever been tempted to leave Madison? Have people ever tried to talk you into leaving Madison, and why do you stay?
Yes, actually we did leave Madison when we first started our company. we got into an incubator in Mountain View, so we picked up our bags, moved to Mountain View. But you know, the nature of our company, basically there is the fact that we work with Midwest manufacturing companies. We found ourselves flying back to the Midwest, you know, time and time again. So then we sort of just kind of looked at each other like, this is stupid, why are we here? And we decided to move back to Madison. I think also, you know, we've never really fit the mold of your sexy startup, you know, in Silicon Valley. You know, we the software we build is used by, you know, manufacturing companies. So because of that, you know, we wanted to be in a place where manufacturing was happening. And Madison, you know, I went to school here. I love the city because it's just, even when I was deciding to come to school here from Philly, you know, I just love the coziness of the city, and it just kind of kept me here.
Can we get a show of hands from the crowd? How many entrepreneurs do we have here? Okay, great. How many people, if you can keep your hands up, how many people plan to be here in 20 years? Okay. No, that's great. That's great. Because I think, you know, having that sort of sustained community is what we're really looking for and kind of what we're starting right now. So I wanted to talk to Troy a little bit about Generator. And you guys are having a Generator event tonight for G-Beta, which is your Wisconsin-centric program. You're focusing on Wisconsin universities. And that's because your main flagship Generator program has started to draw from all over the country. Mm-hmm. Your acceptance rate is 1% for companies, yeah. So do you feel like you're reaching outside of Wisconsin a little bit? You might be giving us a little bit of a national presence, not to, you know, stoke your ego or anything, but tell me about that.
Sure. So when we started Generator in the summer of 2012, by virtue of the fact that my co-founder Joe and I both lived in Wisconsin. We were obviously located here physically as a presence, and the majority or all the companies in our first 2 cohorts were Wisconsin-based, and much of that was to be expected. I think there was a combination of some pent-up demand for the business model that we are pursuing, as well as the fact that these companies were in our backyard. As we progressed through that, I think we were able to produce some positive outcomes for the companies that we invested in and worked with, and that allowed us to start to get more kind of inbound applications from out of the state. And being privately funded, we owed it to our investors to invest in what we thought are the opportunities that had the highest chance of return on investment. And so as that continued, we began to get more and more national and even international reach, to the point where we've invested in one company from Mexico and one company from Canada, in addition to companies from really all over the United States, in addition to right here in Wisconsin. Our hope is that we can, all the work that we do outside of the state, we create hopefully these nodes in the system throughout the country of people talking about Generator, talking about Madison, talking about Milwaukee, talking about Wisconsin. We hope that that endures to the benefit of the state and the entrepreneurial ecosystem we have here. To me, it's a little bit about, I don't bemoan the fact that Frank Kaminsky isn't from Wisconsin, but the fact that he came here and spent as much time as he did, I think benefits all of us here in this room to some extent. So we view it the same way. We've been fortunate enough to be ranked number 14 as the startup accelerator in the United States, and we hope that that continues to.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about Madison's place in the national startup scene. And I know a lot of you have spent time in other startup cities that are trying to kind of develop their startup community, or you've read about them at the very least. So I was kind of hoping to get your input on a place that you've been that's doing something that you think we should emulate. Troy, do you want to start with that one? I mean, you're traveling around so much to recruit these businesses.
Interesting. I'd say, a place that can be a center of gravity. So obviously we're here at 100state, and in fact Generator's a floor below, so there is quite a bit of density here at 30 West Mifflin. But I think those types of rich communities, not only for the intra-connectivity amongst people within that ecosystem, but also the fact that they are essentially a lighthouse for outsiders wanting to engage in that community. So what I struggle with is, for instance, I'm going to Indianapolis and Columbus later this week to meet with startups. There was nothing obvious in either of those two cities that was a lighthouse that I could just go to and knew that from that one point of entry I could have multiple exit doors to go on. I think the more a community can have something like that, be it 100state, be it the pending starting block development on East Washington, I think infrastructure like that, what I like to call infrastructure 2.0, if you think of fire departments and sewers and running water as infrastructure 1.0, how can we kind of look to infrastructure 2.0? I think that allows outsiders to better connect with that ecosystem, and by all means, if an outsider wants to come and invest millions of dollars into companies here in Madison, I want to have a bright shining light that attracts them.
So you think we're doing a pretty good job of that so far? We have this space.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
and we've got starting block coming.
That being said, when I go to Chicago, between 1871, Tech Nexus, and Matter, you cover about 90% of that ecosystem. So I think that's really helpful in those communities, and I think we can continue to aspire to have such density here in Madison.
Sure. So Greg, I wanted you to answer this question too. Maybe you could talk a little bit about New York or some other places that you. Yeah. I know you constantly get the New York question.
It's because Madison, I don't like to compare it to New York. It's completely different for so many different reasons. Population being like number one, it's really hard to compare. It's really hard to compare a population of 8.5 million versus 250,000. So that changes so many things from even consumers, right? You can scale your business in one city, New York, depending on the product, but you're not able to do that in the same level where you can in Madison. But I think what Madison's benefit is just the idea that we can be very close-knit because it's smaller, right? So a great example is when Generator has an event downstairs, well, the members here, you know what we do? We go downstairs because they have great content, they have great information, and they have free pizza. So,
and we've got free beer up here, so it's a great partnership. Yeah.
So we'll just head down there, and just that close knit. Or just the fact that all of us are on this panel, because a lot of us have just met already in different events, and it makes us a little bit close-knit, so we can actually help each other in terms of visibility. So when people are new in town and they want to point in the right direction, it's real easy to say, hey, go check out Generator. I mean, in fact, for Generators having an event right now, and there's a 100-state member who's part of that program. So that's just like a great example of this. Our benefit is to be the best Madison, not necessarily try to be like everyone else, but just focus on what's our current strengths are and how do we enhance that through partnerships, conversations, events like this, and so forth.
Is there anything else that anybody has a burning desire to mention on that? Eric, yeah.
Sure. I would just add that the leading tech communities in the United States kind of follow the model of success begetting success. And you look at Silicon Valley with Hewlett-Packard back in the 60s, those people did very well for themselves, reinvested into the community. That led to Microsoft, led to Facebook, led to Snapchat. I mean, you can just see the lineage there. And likewise in Seattle and all of these really, cities to aspire to be like. And companies like Epic and AmFam, I think, are kind of paving the way, but being a little bit more on the bleeding edge of the tech scene here as members of this community, I think that success stories are very important to growing it over the long term.
Like $15 million. I'm just saying. All right, I'm just going to stroke everyone's ego. Go ahead, Kevin.
So I'd also add how we're actually promoting ourselves outside of our borders. I'd echo a lot of the comments about trying not to emulate others, but when I thought about your question, we're certainly trying to do more traveling, but traveling with purpose, getting in front of audiences where we think they're going to be interested in learning more about Madison. And so last year we were at South by Southwest, tens of thousands of business leaders, thought leaders, technologists, all descended upon Austin. And we knew there was going to be a lot of people actually from the Madison area that were there. So in partnership with American Family Insurance, we just put a small event together, and we just said, hey, when you're out and about and you're meeting people, invite them to come and meet other people from Madison and hopefully make new connections. And again, using Troy's metaphor, like be a lighthouse back to what's happening at Madison. And I think for a first year it was really successful, but then you look at a community like DC, and what DC did is they actually rented out an entire restaurant across the street from the convention center, and they had programming all week long, huge signs up there, the We DC House, which was a bit confusing. We were walking by going, WEDC? But they had programming all week long. They brought in their music scene to introduce people to what music and entertainment was like in DC. They had startups down there pitching. In fact, they actually had a contest called Live Free in DC, where they invited startups from anywhere outside of the DC area to pitch to some DC representatives, and the winner got 3 months free space, an entertainment package to actually, that the winner got to build their business in DC. I thought that was really interesting, and when I left the conference, I thought differently about DC outside of just politics. We were wow, DC's really got their act together, and so I'm excited to think more about how we can take our show on the road and make sure that we're promoting on behalf of everybody here.
So Amy, you want? Yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to, at the same time we're going externally to promote ourselves outside of the city, there are many people in this community who aren't in the ecosystem now. And there are plenty of talent, potential ideas, people who need to be supported. So balancing those things of building our web and our extensions externally, but really creating that community here. And I agree with Greg and what some others have said. It's the collaboration. So we can have a beacon of light, which is great, but the fluidity between organizations and the collaboration among organizations allows people within our community to flow through and create open doors. And it also allows people, when they do come to that starting point, to be able to go to all of the things that we have. So when organizations and people operate in silos, it's just silos. It doesn't create flow. And
Are we doing that now? Do you feel like Madison is a siloed startup community? I'm just kidding.
Well, what I think is we are making progress in that in really meaningful ways. That is our potential real uniqueness in a way. I do think that we need to have more flow of people within our community into the ecosystem. I think right now we don't have as much as we potentially could. I think it's a work in progress. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I think we have a lot of potential. But when there are perceived walls of that community doesn't need me, for whatever reasons we put up an image of what the entrepreneur looks like or who belongs in the ecosystem, and you're not really an entrepreneur if you don't fit these 3 criteria, then we lose there's a lot of latent potential out there that doesn't get tapped into. And a lot of the research says the more diversity you have, not just demographic diversity, but types of companies, types of talent, and your point, you have a magician here, that's great. But the more people that you put in connection with each other, the more creativity that potentially can happen, the more innovative solutions to problems that can happen. So I think as a community, that's a space where, in all of Madison, making this ecosystem accessible and meaningful to all those people, and making sure that we work together to do that is a really critical.
Right. And I think Greg is itching to jump in on this.
I'm always itching, but I'm always have something to say. But I would say just being very intentional would help. So people have just a great understanding of, what is the perceived entrepreneur or the perceived talent or the perceived opportunities that are actually available in Madison, because there's plenty of opportunities, but people sometimes don't believe in it. So I know a lot of things we did at 100state is very intentional to kind of break a lot of barriers, and I think we've done a great job at doing that with a lot of just really awesome partners. So just a lot of collaboration. I think it always comes back to that.
Well, and Amy, actually, I need really quick because I want to move on to another thing. Yeah.
There's a difference between good intentions and being intentional.
Sure. Well, and one thing I wanted to bring up is, I think that we're trying to cultivate an identity as a community. And I think some of that has been, like Eric mentioned, we've got AmFam, we've got Epic, and I think that there's kind of this blossom of a health IT, are we going to be a health IT place? And is that our identity? And that's a good thing from a marketing perspective, right, to a certain extent, because then people think, I'm going to move here to start that kind of business. And I know we've heard of companies doing that, which is great. That's great for us. But is that a bad thing in some ways? Because there are going to be people like those you mentioned who think, well, I don't fit in this small niche, so I'm staying out of that community. How do we balance that? Does anybody have any thoughts on what our identity is as a community and the pros and cons? It's philosophical.
They are starting to do more of the events that are geared towards just not only attracting entrepreneurs but also educating basically people with ideas. How do you take your idea from from an idea to a business, to a company? So I think the more we do that, the more we also sort of make ourselves available as entrepreneurs to, mentor the younger generation that's joining this whole pursuit. I think the more we see those barriers being broken, and we all have ideas on how better to do that, and I think maybe we could share, how we could do better at collaborating, or even at breaking those barriers, or even at being intentional, to be more inclusive. I do think the more inclusive we are, the better we are as a community. I mean, studies have been done. I don't need to mention any of those studies, but yes, we need to make that commitment to be more inclusive, and we will be better off by doing that.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric. Sorry, I shouted. Sure. Go ahead.
I think that we have a really unique advantage in Madison being such a college town, having the University of Wisconsin-Madison, having Edgewood, Madison College, in addition to obviously Epic, which is kind of putting us on the map for biotechs and medical technology. What you get with a large student body is just a lot of inherent diversity to begin with. And looking around the room, I mean, I recognize a lot of people who are students at the University of Wisconsin or Edgewood who have their own companies that have nothing to do with healthcare. And I think that that just comes because we have, this fantastic funnel of creative and diverse talent that comes into the city for school. So retaining those people is important.
Absolutely.
So I think when you think about the startup community's identity, I'm not sure that there necessarily is one, but that's okay because I think we're still pretty new at this. I mean, think about where we are right now. 5 years ago, this place doesn't exist. 5 years ago, Troy and Joe and Generator don't exist. And now, as you mentioned, you're already recognized nationally as the 14th best accelerator in the country. Like, imagine what 5 years from now can possibly look like. So I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Actually, it's exciting because I think people who are involved right now know that they're building something.
Let's keep building, right?
So I want to involve Mo and Ruth a little bit, and Kevin some more too. But I wanted to talk to you guys about how government and startups can interact. And I know that that can be kind of a tense interaction sometimes because, no offense, by its nature, government sometimes moves slowly, and startups move quickly. So could you guys tell me a little bit about how you interact with the startup community? And if you can, maybe give me an example of a conversation you've had with an entrepreneur lately where they told you, hey, this is something I need, this is something that government could do to help me, and how you responded to them.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, being on the city council puts you in a situation where council is a part-time job, and so my full-time work is in the startup world. I interact with entrepreneurs and startups all of the time. And one of the things Kevin mentioned, that our community identity has started to change. The tone of the conversation has started to change. One of the things that I used to do is I used to tell people that we have a Chamber of Commerce and say, oh, they have resources. That's changed in the past couple of years as the Chamber has taken a very outward focus in being present and accessible to the startup community. So I'm appreciative of that. As we talk about, earlier it was mentioned that there are opportunities to sort of look at other communities and think about how we can emulate other cities. One of the things that I'm probably more interested in than emulating other cities is finding ways for us to build, exactly to your question, Laurel, finding ways for us to do a better job of building a culture of embrace and collaboration between government and startups, and frankly, between traditional institutions and, as Troy would say, between infrastructure 1.0 and infrastructure 2.0, right? It's really important that these two worlds don't get separated, that as a community, this is how we're going to build strength and momentum as we form our identity as a startup community, is by having all institutions embrace and appreciate sort of the modern economy. There are questions that I get from entrepreneurs all of the time where they're asking for needs, but it's Ruth's job to do that, so I'll let Ruth answer that
one. That was a great handoff. I love that. So first, I was just going to mention really quickly that the city does work with entrepreneurs a little one-off in a number of ways. The city supports through funding the Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corporation, they're here tonight, and the Madison Development Corporation that do really targeted, very preliminary, beginning lending to new startups throughout the city. We also support the Latino Chamber and the Black Chamber in Madison to, help encourage growth in the entrepreneurial community outside of the tech world here. And we have had these great leaders from the entrepreneurial community on our council that have started to affect some of the programming that we're doing. For example, a few years ago, Alder Scott Resnick introduced the Entrepreneurship and Technology Fund, which is actually out right now as a request for proposal, which is a $600,000 investment in starting an entrepreneurial fund that would really focus on technology and women and people of color to try to help grow a funding base for work like that. And we're also supporting Starting Block. So there's a lot of ways that we sort of one step removed work with groups that work with entrepreneurs. But people forget too that we're a city and we do municipal things. So I get calls about people's trash not being picked up. There's a business owner here tonight, I won't mention them, that we have spoken to about real serious parking challenges that they're facing in the Isthmus area for their employees. And so that's another place where the city really comes in, and it is those smaller, sometimes very municipal issues that can drive a business crazy enough to not want to hang out here anymore. And so we take that part really serious too, to try to look at ways to just improve the environment of our city. One thing too is that there are also a lot of entrepreneurial activities happening right now that are not directly related to technology and downtown. And one of the more creative ones, I think, is one that Alder Cheeks is leading in the Allied neighborhood as they sort of build a community cooperative, which is an extremely entrepreneurial adventure for that neighborhood to kind of as a community come together and say, we need a grocery store. Who's going to start it? No one. We will. And so the neighborhood is coming together as a community to do that, and the city is supporting that through some funding as well. So
yeah, I feel like part of what everybody's touching on a little bit is the community needing to be more inclusive and working together and bringing diverse populations in. And that's obviously one element that we look to when we're trying to draw people into the community, right? So when we want people to move to Madison to start a business, they need to be confident that it's going to be a community that's diverse and inclusive. I talked to someone from Exact Sciences the other day, and they were talking about in the early stages of their company how critical recruiting was and how critical one person that they brought on board was to launching their business and making it successful. So I kind of took a step back and thought, okay, well, they were successful. They got the guy to move here. How successful are other businesses? What do you guys think? How is Madison doing recruiting-wise? Do you think that we're an appealing city for people to move to start a startup? And I've talked to Mo about this before, so could you talk a little bit about recruiting to kick us off?
Without remembering what conversation we're thinking of specifically.
I'm expecting verbatim what you told me before.
So I think we are getting a lot better at recruiting. I think as Madison is growing rapidly, it's establishing a name for itself. And as we are, as we're growing, one of the challenges that we're starting to be able to overcome is people even knowing where Madison is, knowing where Wisconsin is, and thinking, oh, that might be worthwhile. I've heard some good things there. So I think, in my experience, having gone through the experience of hiring folks and looking nationally for people, I haven't found it to be particularly difficult to recruit. One of the things that I will say is it is difficult sometimes for people of color to move here and stay here. Because if you can't find your tribe, if you don't know where your community is, if your community is so small that it's difficult to connect, that becomes a retainment challenge. I think just like anyone else, someone who's looking for professional opportunity, there's career opportunity, you're going to move, it's the retainment that becomes a serious challenge. And in that case, I've seen incidents, this is what you're thinking of, I've seen incidents where people where minorities are trying to be recruited for senior positions in companies in town, and they come, their CEO or whomever takes them on kind of a tour of the city. This is, here's Gray's, and here's some awesome places to eat, and here's the Edgewater, and here's, all these beautiful amenities. And throughout that experience, people start to kind of look around and say, who will my kids play with? What will be the lived experience for my children here? And if they don't, if people don't see opportunities for their children, if they don't see opportunities for their family, that becomes a problem. And so it's extremely important for us to be mindful of that at the earliest ages, to create opportunities for people, for everyone to see their careers potentially in this world, so that as we continue to grow and as we continue to diversify a generation from now, that won't be hard to see. That won't be hard to observe. But we have a lot of work to do between now and then.
Yeah, I mean, Troy, do you ever have issues convincing people to come to an accelerator program in Wisconsin?
I'd say the biggest thing is probably the weather.
There is nothing we can do about that.
That being said, I can only compare our two programs, one in Madison, one in Milwaukee. Our Madison one operates in the dead of winter. Our Milwaukee one tends to be in the summer or fall. I'd say we have an easier time recruiting people to Madison in the dead of winter. And I think that speaks to kind of this increasing positive cachet that Madison has.
That's great. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add about,
Well, what I would just say, just talking to some of the major employers around town that spend a lot of time recruiting, so people who have no connection, so their response when they say Madison, where is that, or I hear it's cold, what we hear consistently from recruiters is that if they're actually able to get people to Madison, then it becomes more about the job and the impact on their family, which is a really positive thing. But it's getting them here that can be a challenge sometime, and getting past the weather and getting, making that a selling point and helping them understand that there's a lot of really exciting things that are happening here. But once they come here and they see that, I guess their perception has changed.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like, I would love to hear more thoughts on how the Madison community is perceived in terms of prospects for growth for startups. Does anybody have any thoughts on where we're going to be in 5 years, or where you want the city to be in 5 years?
Well, I'll just say that, I think right now in city government, there's a real strong push towards inclusiveness in a lot of the programming and funding that we're doing. And I think there's a hope that as a community, because this conversation has been brought up by so many different parts of the community, the business community, the not startup,
Entrepreneurial,
not entrepreneurial. The good people in the world who do good, the nonprofits. That's what I'm saying. That's the word. Nonprofit community. I mean, there's just been such a push to have this conversation now. And I think right now, because the push is still, I can't believe we've maintained this discussion for as long as we have. And I think that that's just because there's such a drive from every part of the community to really try to have some meaningful impact happen. And I hope that everyone is starting to see the seeds of that be planted now, so that in 5 years the startup community will look a lot more inclusive. So that's one hope that I have. But,
I'm with you, Ruth.
Yeah.
And I think, we started, one of the first questions are, what are other cities doing that we should emulate? And I actually think in 5 years, other people will be coming here to say, how do we emulate Madison? Because they have figured out how to be inclusive. They have figured out these things that we all identify. I mean, we're not the only city that has this challenge. Every city really has it. But that's what I would like to see in 5 years, is people saying they've gotten it right, or they're doing pretty well over there. What should we do? What can we learn from Madison about inclusive entrepreneurship?
So in 5 years, regardless of the startup scene or anything else, 5 years from now, I think we have the opportunity to be, exactly to your point, Amy, I think we have the opportunity to be a city where other communities throughout the United States and throughout the world will look to us and say, how did they do it? How did they become a model for closing the opportunity gap for entrepreneurship, for education, for housing, across the board. I mean, Madison's a phenomenal community in so many respects, and yet, as it relates to equitable opportunity, we have a tremendous amount of room for improvement, right? And so with being a great city, with a disproportionate percentage of people volunteering their time, donating their money, and willing to serve and interested in building up this community, I think we're really well positioned to be a model city for the rest of the world on what it looks like to move that needle, what it looks like to close the opportunity gap, and that'll be true in startups, that'll be true in education, that's what Madison's will be known for in 5 years if we get this right.
And I would imagine then just a lot of improvements in retention. So kind of like what Mo was saying, whether it's people of color, whether, the UW students, this is one of the best schools in the world, one of the #1 recruiters in Madison, and how do you retain that talent? Like, people are coming for 4 years and, well, I can't wait to move on and leave, right? So maybe a strong emphasis on there, and as well as EPIC, which is in the area. So there's a lot of young professionals and, people between the ages of 18 to 35, I would imagine, that are coming into town. So, what are the efforts and what's in place to make sure that they feel welcome and they have a reason to stay beyond, this, I guess being very like a short-term goal, right? Like, they come here. I'm in a kind of example, right? I've been here for less than 2 years. And right now it's because of certain opportunities. Okay, now we'll see what we could still evaluate on what that looks like, right? How what I will do in the next 5 years. I don't even know yet. But there's this.
Could you leave us?
No, I'm not gonna. I don't want to make any. I wouldn't want to make a promise like that. But I would say that a lot of the improvements in Madison and what's been going on has been very encouraging. Just whether it's being more inclusive. Just bringing opportunities, whether it's like the cap times, or even, how their write-ups have improved, and just kind of showcasing like what is happening in all communities throughout the city. So that's just something, just a lot of improvements. I kind of really expect that in 5 years, because, everyone was saying 5 years ago where it was. So it seems like there's a lot of traction. It's just a matter of people in this table, in this room, and, people that to kind of work to the highest level to make the city as great as it possibly can be, because it's kind of in our control as a collective community.
And Eric, you wanted to add something?
Sure, I'll make it really fast, but just going off of what Greg and Mo said, equitable opportunity, I think, comes once you have a critical mass of people working in tandem to get from point A to point B. I think the last 5 years have been sort of slowly filling that out, and communities like 100state, programs like Generator have been great in kind of starting to fill that out, and now that we have a critical mass, I think we can all start moving in a direction together to make it great.
And I feel like we keep, kind of like we were talking about inclusiveness before, I feel like we keep coming back to retention. Are you guys all pretty optimistic about keeping the businesses that are starting to thrive here? We've got the foundations built. We've got to have the people stay to keep building them. Do you guys feel good about that? You do, Eric.
Yeah. We employ about 110 people here in Madison, and we're not going anywhere. We love it here.
On our end, 100state, we feel good. We're definitely gonna have like about 300 members, by next summer, if not earlier. So, we're really happy about what we're doing. A lot of our members, we have a lot of members who are from out of town, who have like, I guess, a similar story like me, where you just kind of stumbled into 100state, and you just met a whole bunch of awesome people, and then that's been your reason to, find something that you want to work on, find people you want to work with. So that's very important. We're very confident what our impact will be in the trajectory going forward.
Awesome. Well, I have an audience question, and if anybody else has audience questions, tweet with the hashtag CT100 Startups, 100 CT Startups.
Yep, 100 CT Startups.
100 CT Startups. And Chris is over there looking at his smartphone right now, so I'm sure he'll get it if you tweet it soon. So the first question is, what work has been done with MadRep to market Madison as entrepreneur friendly?
Well, the city is a member of MadRep, and MadRep has been doing a great job on a federal level in bringing in funding and resources and connections to federal funding to help kind of expand in our sort of targeted sectors, of which technology is one. So, I think the city works very closely with MadRep on a regular basis to make sure that, our voice is being heard throughout the region. Madison is definitely, the big focus of the region. And for those of you who don't know, MadRep is the Madison Regional Economic Development Partnership. So it's Dane County and all the counties that touch Dane County working together to try to market and bring in resources from throughout the country. So I don't know if Alder Cheeks or anyone else wants to talk about it, or Kevin want to mention it, but I think that partnership is strengthening in time.
All right, we feel good about Ruth's answer.
Yeah, that's the end of that talk.
So I would love to get questions from anybody else. Yeah? Do you have a loud voice?
I did last week, so I'll try.
Yeah.
I was trying to tweet, but I forgot the handle, sorry.
That's okay.
So I've actually got recruited up here from Chicago, and I think one of the biggest things that attracted me was everything together, and so I was trying to fit in 244 characters, was how do we tell the story of not just the business side of it, but the community, like the activities, like even the winter sports, pretty phenomenal. How about everyone outside? Now we know. Great outdoor stuff, lots of trees. So, and even here being in 100state, you see all the art around, and like there's a rich cultural community here, so I'm just curious, what are you all thinking in terms of how do we tell the complete story of Madison and the diversity of activities, entrepreneurial opportunities, businesses? Like you came here for MadWorks, and I saw Louis over here. He's responsible, they've been a large part from you being here. And tell that story not only to the sort of stakeholders that you all meet, but how do us and entrepreneurs get out kind of reciprocate and tell that story to have that networking effect to recruit more people and bring them here.
Right, so I'm just going to repeat that just in case anybody didn't hear. So the question was, how do we market Madison as a total community, right? So how do we market not only the business community, the entrepreneurial community, but the cultural scene? How do we make Madison look good as a whole to people coming in?
I guess I can answer that.
Yeah.
I can answer that to some degree. So on 100 states, and I mean, we have the arts, and we have a balance of technology and arts, and well, that's kind of what we think is the solution of, we have this partnership with Field 59, almost kind of another plug for them, but where we're going to actually have a lot of video content of what's happening in Madison, and through some of our other technology that we have, where we've already partnered with other co-working spaces in other states, like different places around the country. We actually use this as a distribution channel for what happens here in Madison, so more people can hear the story. And I think that'll play a bigger role. I think a bigger role than everyone kind of thinks. I mean, because we haven't told everyone exactly what the plan is, but we just know that with the technology that Field 59 has, and a lot of the relationships that we have at 100 State, we can really play a major role for that. And also, at 100 State, we have a very amplifying effect with our members. So a lot of our members are really just doing awesome things, and they really help in spreading the voice of what's happening with what they're doing. A lot of our members are nonprofit organizations, and we want to play a role in amplifying what they're doing. A lot of the art that comes up in Madison, we want to amplify what they're doing. We just want to really just be as loud as possible, because I think that's necessary to create Madison as the brand that it needs to be to attract new talent and have a lot of retention.
Do you guys think we start by marketing to the rest of Wisconsin, and we try to get people to drive down from, up north to come to Madison to work on startups and entrepreneurial things, or do we just go whole hog and go for the whole country marketing now too? I mean, do we have to have kind of a smaller strategy and then go big?
We definitely have to believe it here first, right? And you talk about other areas of the state, I can tell you for a fact that there isn't an awareness of actually what's happening here, and old perceptions about what our economy, what our community is. This is a government, this is a college town, this is the state capital, and that's it, right? The three-legged stool. We just held our first state legislative day for state legislators about Madison. So those of you who have not worked at the Capitol or around the Capitol, every region of the state has their own lobby day, like the Chippewa Valley Rally and Sheboygan Brat Days, and they come down, and their mayors and their business leaders and civic leaders and educators and others come down, And what's great about it is that legislators are very focused on their own districts, but they might not have a good familiarity of other parts of the state, and that conversation allows them to say, oh, but here's what's going on in Green Bay. Here's what our needs are. For some reason, we've never thought to do that in Madison, and that's on us, but we just had our first legislative day last year. And the great thing is that when you actually tell the story and let them know about what's happening in our community, and specifically the economic message, is it really resonates on both sides of the aisle. But I think education is important. I think raising the awareness in state and more locally is very important.
And one thing that we talked about a lot as the city's been planning our economic development strategy was better partnering with the University of Wisconsin to reach out to alumni. I think people who've spent their undergraduate here who have, we talk a lot about retaining them, but it's also sort of beautiful to have them go out in the world, learn in other places, and then bring that back to us when they're maybe ready to nest or start their own business, and to have, a lot of them do leave with they're fantastic alumni associations all over the world. I got to spend time with the alumni in Hong Kong for a night, and they were just amazing people, and to just sort of reach out to everyone to say this is a place where you might be able to afford to really start your business and have a really great quality of life too. So
the one thing that I would like to emphasize is I'm Madisonian through my core, but at the same time, I think that sometimes it comes down to being looked at as kind of a zero-sum game, and it's kind of us and them. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity here in the state of Wisconsin to have innovative people all over the state doing great things, building awesome companies. I think it's very logical to think that as a cultural, as a business, as an educational epicenter of the state, Madison would kind of rise above the rest as maybe like kind of the driving leader of that. But at the same time, I think that when over half of the nation's venture capital is going out to Silicon Valley, it's not worth it to think about how can we get people to move from Green Bay to Madison. It's more important to think about how can we build awesome stuff together as a state.
Yeah, that's absolutely the message. I think is the point. Is we root for Green Bay, we root for Milwaukee, and that a Madison or a Verona or a Sun Prairie job is a Wisconsin job. And you're right, it goes even beyond that.
Yeah.
Troy, can you talk about the Milwaukee-Madison relationship in terms of how those startup communities interact and how that might be a little bit better?
Yeah, so I'd say currently there's just not a whole lot of interaction, frankly. I think there's a perception on both communities that the other is further away than it is or less accessible than it is. I make that commute, depending what season we're in, about 4 days a week, so not a whole lot of sympathy here. If we could get rid of the force field in Lake Mills, supposedly that's where it is, I think we could overcome that challenge. But it's different, I think. The benefit of Milwaukee, frankly, in terms of our line of work, is that it's the home of many successful large corporations. So when you have companies like Rockwell and Kohl's and Harley-Davidson and Miller, Johnson Controls, all in one community, Madison can't even compare to that in terms of the corporate firepower that they have. But if you look at the digital tech scene in terms of what's happening in Madison, it's purely a difference of kind and not degree.
So how can we make that better? Because I think we would all agree that we need to work with Milwaukee, that we need to have a stronger partnership,
Sure.
that force field needs to come down.
I think people just need to be open to and curious enough to explore the two communities and vice versa. I think it ultimately comes down to just that raw curiosity. I know there's been some kind of intentional programming around capital entrepreneurs chartering buses to go to start at Milwaukee events and vice versa. I think the more of that type of stuff we can do, the better.
Does anybody else want to comment on the Milwaukee-Madison force field wall barrier? All right, I've got another audience question. Oh yeah, sure.
It takes less time to get to Milwaukee than it does to get from one side rather than that. So there's not not a problem.
Yeah, that's true. In case anybody didn't hear, it takes less time to get to Milwaukee from here than it gets one side of Chicago to the other. So think about that the next time you're driving, Troy. You could just be driving from the west side to the east side.
I did just think, I mean, I know Joe and Troy teach a class at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, but I think collaboration between the universities would be a good place to start.
Nice. So I'll move on to that audience question. We talked a little bit about recruiting earlier, and someone in the audience is interested in hearing success stories and failures, if you're willing to share them, in diversity, in recruiting and retention. Does anybody have a story that's perhaps a sad story? Something didn't work out, because that's how we improve, right? We say, like, this didn't work out and this is why. And
yeah,
does anybody have anything
I won't name the company, but I too, as part of my job, talk to a lot of the larger and smaller employers throughout the city, and one of the saddest stories I heard in recruitment in that world was a company worked really hard to recruit someone. It was an international hire, and the family that moved here for the husband's job was really excited about Madison, because they had people who had been connected to the university and had heard all these wonderful things. And when they got here, they spent 2 years really trying to find a community and could not find one, and eventually made the decision to leave. And what makes me so sad about that was just that they had the initial excitement, and I think that's sort of the promise of what Madison can appear to be, and then their actual day-to-day experience just did not match that. The company has since put in a lot of effort learning, really, and they mentioned that specific event, into better being much more involved in the first few years of new recruits' experiences here, and to work really actively in that first year to connect them with community. I hope that they're seeing improvement, but to me that was one of those ones where it really just showed that, that promise, and what we all love about Madison is someone believed that and they moved here and just didn't experience that. So I hope I made that a little bit happy at the ending. It wasn't just sad. But, yeah.
I could sense that everyone was getting a little down.
Yeah, I was bringing us down.
Glad that you
I tried to lift us back up.
Yeah. So does anybody have a story that they feel like illustrates a real strength of Madison? They were bringing somebody into town and it was a real home run, and you thought, the community is doing something really great, and I tapped into it and that's why this worked?
I guess I can talk about one experience we just had. We've been recruiting a data scientist from who's finishing up his PhD at Stanford, and we were we knew that if we were to bring him here in the winter, he may not stay with us. So we brought him over here in the summer. He liked I think ultimately when you come to work in a new community, and your first couple months you connect with people in that community, that really helps you to stay in that community. And I think he would tell you that when he was here in the summer and he got to play soccer on campus and connect with other people in the data science community using meetup groups. I don't know if you guys know about the meetup.com. It's basically it's a website that has all these events around professional software development, you name it, they have it on that website. I think we didn't help him to do it. He was very conscientious in looking out for these experiences, and that has really helped him connect with the community more than anything else. And well, we're joking right now that we tricked him.
Yeah.
But,
well, unless there's anything else. Oh, yeah.
I have a quick story too.
Yeah.
This was several years ago, I think 3 years ago, and at that point our company only had about 10 full-time employees. Kind of illustrates how a multifaceted community like Madison could really positively impact your business. We got a resume from a software engineer, and we were looking to hire a software engineer, but at this point we didn't really have very much clout to say. This resume came in because this guy's wife had just moved back to the University of Wisconsin to do her postdoc, and he was looking for a software engineering job in Madison. And I remember I was eating my Cheerios this morning, and I looked at his resume and I like spit them out all over the table because he had a PhD and he was from China originally. And he had no interest really in coming to a startup, but the great thing was his fiance was coming to Madison and he was just going to come along. So he left his job at Google, he started working at EatStreet, and now I was just talking to him recently, and he says that if EatStreet ever sells or whatever, changes hands, his next thing that he's going to do is start another company. So it's kind of that serendipity that even though obviously the university isn't like directly related to the startup scene, having the university or having Epic here, having AmFam, I mean, these are different things that bring people in and can create success stories, not just for the community at large, but the startup community, kind of through cause and effect.
Well, I think that is a beautiful way to wrap things up, and we've run out of time. So can we get another round of applause for this great panel of people? Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it. I think these folks are probably going to hang around for a little bit if you have any more questions. And we have another Cap Times talk coming up in January. It's about apartments in Madison. So if you're interested in the apartment boom in Madison, you can stay tuned to our Facebook page. There'll be more info. So thanks again, guys.